right, everybody, welcome back to the Fly Fishing Insider Podcast. I'm Christian, your host. This week, we've got John Stallion on the line. And John, you operate a podcast called Days of the Wild. You also are a heavy participant, and maybe you are more than that. You could tell me on that. But Howl for Wildlife. And Howl for Wildlife is an organization that really helps us all as anglers and hunters with conservation, activity, et cetera. And I want you to kind of really define that for us and what your mission is. But they have a Howlcast podcast as well that you could tune in. So there's two podcasts for you guys to check out. One is Days in the Wild and Howlcast. And before you guys get going, this really is a show for you. I know it's not core fly fishing, etc., but we do a lot of talking about the importance of conservation and how we as anglers, hunters, conventional anglers, etc., all tie together and really play together on that conservation and preservation side and how important that is to you. So we're going to wrap through some of those things, some really interesting information. And then last is we're going to talk about a tip, and that's, John, your tip on, the immediacy side of things and how you can actually take action today or recruit today, et cetera, to help these kinds of causes. So, John, welcome to the show, man. It's really great to have you.
No, thank you. Thanks for having me. Yeah, like you said, this is not probably seemingly not important to your listenership. Hey,
Yeah.
I'm a fly fisherman, and when it comes to being targeted by the anti-hunting and fishing world, you're probably the highest. I shouldn't say the low-hanging fruit. You're the highest fruit on the tree.
Yeah.
They're not really shooting for you guys yet. In a lot of places, but in some places they are. They are coming for a lot of the access stuff, a lot of waterway type policy that would affect your ability to go fishing. But from the grand scheme of things, guys who use barbless hooks and do catch and release fishing are the least threatening to the anti-hunting.
That's right.
Anti-hunting and anti-fishing public.
Right. But at the same standpoint, don't look in the back of your room and see the sheds and things and go, oh, this guy's not an angler, because you started out angling as a young kid in New York, moved to Arizona, did a little bit there, but you really fell into the passion of hunting. And I think that sounds like where you really started to understand, hey, this is more just than A and B. This is a joint effort.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the biggest realization. We'll keep coming back to that as we go along here, but the biggest thing is to realize that we're all in this together. All of us sportsmen, no matter what we do, whether we're gator hunting in Florida or fly fishing in Utah or mountain lion hunting in Arizona or deer hunting in Pennsylvania, we're all in this together. We're all interconnected. And it is the reason why we have the ability to do what we do. It's the reason why we get to hunt and fish. It's the reason why we have access. It's because of this unity and because of everything that we do for conservation, and the model of North American model conservation is the reason why we are the largest shareholder at the conservation table. So you probably shouldn't glaze over or pass over this episode, because you're probably not going to learn much about fly fishing from me, but you will learn a lot about how we're interconnected and why it's important for you to care.
Very cool. Let's do it. So you mentioned to me early on, hey, look, Howl for Wildlife has 3 major pillars. Maybe you give me a brief description of like Howl for Wildlife came about,
Sure.
the mission, and then let's drop into those 3 pillars and break those down.
Absolutely. Well, how we came about was one of my best friends and I, Charles Whitwam, who is the president of Howl for Wildlife, I'm the vice president. well, he had called me up and he's like, hey, they're trying to ban bear hunting in California, completely get rid of bear hunting. And I told him, I'm like, listen, let's start a change.org petition, and we know a lot of people. I've been podcasting for years. You know, a lot of people. Let's just kind of get it out there and try to get as many signatures as possible. And the beautiful thing about it is, well, one, the way Charles wrote it was amazing, because not only hunters and anglers got involved, but people who are non-hunting got involved. And he set the decision maker, the person who was, his name was Senator Weiner. Yes, that's not a joke. Senator Weiner in out of San Francisco. He set the action towards him. Like, so all the change.org petition signers, the notifications would go to him. And after 3 days, we had like 22,000 signatures, and there was like $18,000 donated. I say donated, but it's not really donated when you use change.org, by the way. It's change.org is a for-profit entity, and that $18,000 goes to change.org. It doesn't go to the cause, just so you know. So if you see those things, be leery about that. But Senator Weiner got all this negative feedback from hunters and anglers saying, hey, no, we want this. Don't come after it. And he dropped it.
Okay.
So, which, you know, actually I had been doing for a while. I've been kind of like working in this space and trying to develop this initiative called the Hunter Up Initiative, where I was trying to get really hunters and anglers to be good to each other. Like, you know, that mindset of we're in this together. I've had it. I started it back in 2016. But it really came to fruition with Howl for Wildlife. Charles developed our website, which we'll get into the mechanics of it. And we started thinking about, hey, we need to have a change.org basically for hunters and anglers to voice their opinion on things. We need this ability to connect with the decision makers on policy that affects what we want to do.
Okay. And
so that was the birth of Howl for Wildlife. So and it's still the mainstay of what we do. So if you go to our website, and I can share the screen with you.
Sure.
If you go to our website and you go to our action center, and you'll see there's actions in there. Right now it's we're kind of coming out of bill season here, so there's not as many up there, but there's different actions on here. And if you click on an action, this happens to be one in Vermont, and this is going to take away the ability for the wildlife managers to do their job there. So you read through it, gives you all the information, and then at the end of it, it gives you an option to email or call. And if you decide to email, okay, you put your name and your address and email in here, and you select, you know, whatever state you're from and whatever, and then you click add your howl. It's going to send a pre-drafted email. So this is a pre-drafted email right here, and you can edit this. You can put it whatever you want. I am cool. You know, you can put whatever you want in that as well to make it your own. And this is randomized. There's going to be several thousand versions of this, and this will go directly to all the decision makers on that policy.
Okay.
And that's what makes it so powerful. It's a connection between you and the decision maker. They're hearing directly from, and people are like, oh, well, I'm not from Vermont. Well, because of the way hunting and fishing is set up in the United States, where, you know, you be living in Utah, you can come to Arizona and come fly fishing here anytime you want. You know, you're going to pay an out-of-state fee to do that, but you could still come here to do it.
Right. And the
So,
policy still affects me. I
right,
mean,
exactly. So wildlife is held in the public trust in the United States. So you are a stakeholder, you are a constituent of that decision maker in whatever state. Now, does your voice hold as much weight as this, if I was the guy contacting him and from
home
his
state.
or yeah,
Yeah.
from his
Or
own state, his own
his
region, his own,
voting region.
yeah,
Right.
exactly. No, not as much, but you still count, and they still take you into consideration. And we were given some different metrics as to what that really looked like, and it's high. So you, if you called right now and you said, "Hey, I'm Christian and I oppose this, taking away salmon fishing in Northern California," and you call the California,
Mm-hmm.
the three people overseeing that committee, even though you're from Utah, they would know that you plan to
That's
go,
tax dollars coming into
yeah,
my state.
you're planning to go fishing there at some point. It means something to you, whatever. So they look at you, and a phone call to them from out of state, they consider you 500 people.
Yeah.
If you're in state, they consider you like 1,000 people
That's interesting.
as a phone call. As an email, it drops considerably, but into the hundreds, lower hundreds. But it's like 100 versus 200.
Yeah.
But
So
it's
there's
still,
weighted values
yes,
essentially to the
yep.
type that you. The other thing I wanted to back up just a second because, I sat on the board for the Utah Stream Access Coalition. And one of the things that I found is really interesting, you talked about this, we're in it together. And even though you're out of state, so let's use the example. You said, hey, salmon fishing in California.
Hmm.
If they pass that bill in California,
Hmm.
Oregon then has reference to that bill as a policy that is accepted
Sure,
and can use that as leverage in law to change policy in their area. So
100%.
we dealt with that, for example, with stream access being privatized.
Hmm.
So it's privatized in Utah, then it got privatized in New Mexico, then there's privatization in Idaho, Wyoming, you go down the
Right,
list. But then there's areas with high water marks. So you can reference both sides, but let's not provide any more ammunition than
100%.
is
That's
actually
precedence.
needed. Yeah.
It sets precedence, legal precedence for sure. That's 100%. Another thing for guys that are listening to this that were like, "Hey, I don't want to. This stupid hunter's on here. I don't want to listen to him. I don't hunt." Um, you know, I don't know exactly what the numbers are, but it's something like 95% of all hunters are fishermen as well.
Yeah, yeah.
So, okay, we're 16 million as hunters in the United States, right? And I believe fishing is 54 million. So, roughly 15 million and change of the 54 million. So, we make up about 30%. Hunters make up about 30% of fishing's constituency.
Yeah. Yep.
So, you got to kind of keep that in mind too. Like, and I'm not saying, hey, that's not a way to strong arm anybody, but it's all relevant. And I'm trying to tie it all back together, how we're all in this together here, and why it matters, because the writing's on the wall. Excuse me, got the hiccups again. I don't know why this happening to me today, but um, the writing's on the wall in a lot of different states. And you mentioned Oregon. So Oregon had a potential ballot box initiative that thankfully did not get enough signatures, but they're kind of reorganizing it to do that again. And there was no, it was proposing to get rid of fishing, hunting, all animal husbandry. You couldn't be a rancher. You couldn't even cut your dog's toenails if you wanted to. Like, that's the end goal. They showed us their hand. That's what their end goal is. They want to see all of it go away. And I can assure you, okay, I told you there's 15 million hunters and 54 million, anglers. If all of us were together doing things and working together to in the same and going in the same direction, they would have a very, very, very hard road
Yeah.
to overcome. So, anyway, I digress on that. But I wanted to point that out, that you may not be a hunter, but the guy next to you, fishing next to you, might be a hunter.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're all brothers in arms in a certain sense.
Yeah.
So
And I'll point out too, those are avenues into the different sports, right? So, I mean, I'll use the example. I grew up in Pennsylvania. It was a rite of passage. 13 years old, you went up to the police station, you took your hunter safety course. And if you didn't pass on the first time, your dad, all his buddies, your older brothers and cousins all made fun of you. You had to go take the test again, right? I mean, that's how it was. It was like rite of passage, right? But, I fished as a kid in a pond with a worm and a bobber and had fun, but it was like this change. You went to camp all of a sudden, you were part of the crew, you learned all kinds of life skills, how to, prepare your animals, how to hunt and stalk, how to be patient. I mean, all those things. But then I left hunting for years. I got into high school, junior high school, collegiate sports, et cetera, and was like, you know what? I'm not going to do those things. I don't have the time, et cetera. And later in life, I came back, but I didn't go back to hunting. I went back to fishing, and I started fly fishing. And so all those things accelerated my growth in that later on and got me hyper involved. And I appreciated it that much more. And I think when you start to lose some of those elements as a younger person, you don't get that development, right? You don't get those entries. So it is a working together. I didn't start out as a fly fisherman. Nobody taught me. I learned from some buddies as I was older, like, hey, go on a trip. Oh, it sounds fun. And then I fell in love with it. Right. So a little bit different. Everybody has their own angle.
Yep.
So
Absolutely.
working together, I think, you're key. So let's do this. So number one, let's jump on number one. Number one, if I recall, it was you provide tools for hunters and anglers to voice to the policyholders. That's a big difference. You're not just voicing your opinion, but you're voicing your opinion in the right direction. And we determine policyholders as decision makers.
Right. Correct.
So talk about some of the ways that you do that.
So, again, like I use the example of that I showed you on the Action Center. We have targeted, the messaging is targeted to the people who are making decisions on that policy. So if they're coming for, brook trout in, Utah, the people that are making the decision on whether that gets to stay or go, those are the people that we send it to. So most organizations, fishing or hunting, will say, hey, go contact your legislator. Well, your legislator may or may not have anything to do with that policy. That's number one. Number two is, who the heck is my legislator? Like
right. I have no idea. I'm not.
Most people don't.
Right.
I don't know who mine is. I mean, I do now. I do because I'm in this thing, but like I didn't until pretty recently, honestly, in the last couple of years. But if I what am I going to say? What do I say to this person?
Right.
How do I construct an email that sounds, one, intelligent, that hits the key points and gets my point across? The last thing we want to do is, and I for some reason always use this like quasi Southern accent to do this to do this example.
Yeah.
But it has nothing to do with anything other than I'm trying to paint a picture. But you always, oh, that's not right, whatever.
Yeah.
Like that.
We don't want emotional responses.
Yeah, that argument never does well for anybody.
No.
So
it has to be factual based. It has to show credibility from a standpoint of.
Sure.
I would think number one, revenue. Right.
Yeah.
How is
Well,
this going to affect state revenue? And then number two, I'm not saying this is the proper order, right? Revenue, I think, is number one because those guys look at money, in my
mm-hmm,
opinion. Number two is constituency. So as a citizen, what are my rights, et cetera, et cetera? It's sad that that's number two,
mm-hmm.
but I think that those two things are really big to me. Like if you could clarify that in your message and have an understanding, like you said, intelligent response, it's different than an emotional response of, well, it's my right to have fishing in this area
Mm-hmm.
and I want to teach my kids.
Right. Yeah. So the teaching of the kids thing is a great point, but waving it around as you're right. Number one, hunting and fishing in most states, not a right. It's a privilege. And even things that we view as rights. So we have the right to bear arms in the United States, correct? But even that, if you were a felon or you had a record, you wouldn't be allowed to have a firearm.
Mm-hmm.
So even that, you can't say, "Oh, this is my right." Okay, so we need to protect our rights. We need to protect our privileges by doing the right thing. I think one of the you were kind of listing out what the important things are. I think the important things are when developing an argument to protect something that you want to do and continue to do, um, is what does the science say?
Mm-hmm.
We should all be following the science. We should all be following, hey, is this good? Is this for the greater good of the species that we want to pursue?
Mm-hmm.
Right. Um, when they set slot limits or when they set a bag limit or possession, whatever, a lot of people get upset about that within our ranks.
Mm-hmm.
But the reality of it is, as long as those things are being done because they're trying to propagate whatever species that is,
Mm-hmm.
we should all be supporting it. Now, the flip side of that is, or if they're, what's the word I'm looking for? Like placating to anti-hunting and fishing by taking something away from you, then that's a different story.
Right.
That's completely different. That's different than the wildlife manager saying, "Hey, no, we need to reduce the number of tags, or we need to reduce the number of fish being able to be taken out of here, or we need to only take away this size or greater." That's a different story. They're doing
Mm-hmm.
that for a management reason,
Mm-hmm.
and as much as that hurts us in the sense that it takes us away from what we want to do, we we have to think of the big picture. We have to look at it and say, "Hey, they're doing this so that I can continue to keep doing this. Yes, my opportunity might not be as good as it used to be. I may not be able to go every day, or maybe not be able to take 5 fish a day, or shoot,
Mm-hmm.
go deer hunting every year, but I can still go
Right.
once every 3 years, or whatever the case may be." And hopefully, through their practices, there will be a rebound of that species, and it will be like you remember it.
Yeah.
Those are the things you need to think of.
Yeah.
But I think big arguments like the human intrinsic values that we never showcase. We never showcase the camaraderie, the heritage, the meals, the the wanting to the challenge of it, all these things. We talk about money a lot. That's about the only thing that
Mm-hmm.
hunting and fishing ever talks about is the money, which, believe me, it's a huge reason why hunting and fishing is still around, and if not the biggest reason, because of greed. But um, the middle ground doesn't.
Get talked about enough.
They
Yeah.
don't see it. They don't hear it, and when they do hear it and see it, it's not necessarily as important to them as if you said, "Oh, I'd love to take my son. This is a pastime of me and my son. My dad used to do this with me.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever. We love eating this. We love making meals together." love sharing camp or whatever the case may be. Like those things resonate, and it's not like we're not saying those things to like pull the wool over their eyes or anything. We're not
No. Yeah.
doing it to be deceptive. Those are the things you need to share with people because those are the things that you might take for granted, but those are the things that are seemingly important to the non-hunting public.
Yeah.
So
I mean, that's some of these policymakers, I think you have to remember, they don't have these experiences to relate to in hunting and fishing. And
most
so
of
you
them
have to
don't.
you have to draw those lines. So I mean, an example is my holiday tradition wasn't baking cookies and setting them out for Santa.
Nope.
My holiday tradition was going out with my grandfather and my father and my brother, and we reset traps
Mm-hmm.
because we loved resetting traps and talking through it. And I learned more from my grandfather in those evenings than I did in, the 15 years I knew him.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a compelling and relatable story to somebody who doesn't hunt or fish, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think drawing those lines is important too.
Yeah. 100%. 100%.
Okay, so you have a direct voice to policyholders, which I really like because you said it's the person that's making the decision. But on top of that is we also identify a lot of what's going on for you. So we really set you up for success once we have that communication process
Right.
in place.
Yeah.
The next is sorry interrupting, but
No.
you said I have a conduit to drive national awareness to state issues. And I love that combination.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us a little bit more about how you found that to work.
So that's been tremendous. And the best way I could do that is actually give you an example. Right now, there is a ballot initiative, which is the scariest of all because when you have a ballot initiative, you basically have soccer moms, the gas station attendant,
Mm-hmm.
Lunch lady, bus driver, all these different people who have all these different jobs, police officers, whatever, making a decision on a scientific thing. Like they're not the expert in that,
Right.
that's why they call it ballot box biology.
Right.
You know,
And here's the thing. Commonly, these issues that we're talking about, the hunting, the fishing, etc., they're not primary, they're not secondary, they're not tertiary concerns of that voter.
right.
They're way down the line. Those people are typically very undereducated in
Mm-hmm.
comparison to what they should be for the topic. And they're literally just casting a vote one
Right.
way or another on a whim.
And more than likely they've been fed propaganda from the anti-hunting because that's what the anti-hunters, that's what their main mission is. They've been doing that for way before you and I were kids, before Bambi, all that stuff. So that's in the hunting and fishing, anti-hunting fishing world. It's all lies, and all about public perception. And they just spit out propaganda, things like, oh, that's inedible. We don't eat that. In the hunting world, we lop off. We're a bunch of vicious, hillbillies running around willy-nilly shooting crap and drinking beers out of the,
Right.
back of our pickup trucks and lopping off heads and leaving meat out in the woods. And the anglers were just hooking things, ripping lips off and throwing fish back. And we don't care about our environment. We're just, drinking beer and tossing it in the river and whatnot. That's the picture that they paint of us.
Right.
So they've been doing that for a very long time, and that's their MO. They want to, especially nowadays, like, how, I mean, just look at everything in life. Your phone doesn't load a web page in 0.1 second. You get pissed off at it. We consume everything. We consume everything in such a rapid way where, that's why clickbait works. That's why, we make decision on headlines and not actually reading the articles and diving into things. So they have a very easy path to pushing their messaging with short, It's very easy to show a picture of a bloody deer with a guy holding its antlers, or a guy with a string of fish, and
Right.
and paint a negative picture out of that. There's nothing, there's no context there. They don't know what went into that hunt, or what that guy did to get those fish, or what he's going to do with them. So they have a very easy route.
And if there is poor advocacy, right, with an angler or hunter, it's usually a very low percentage of the population that's doing that.
But when it happens, they take it and they run with it.
Oh yeah,
there's a thing
like anything,
right now.
right?
There's a thing right now in Wyoming that it's absolutely atrocious. All the hunters that I know are condemning it. We've condemned it on a national level, but a supposed hunter basically tortured a wolf in Wyoming, and got like a slap on the wrist, basically a $250 fine, because where it happened, he didn't do anything illegal the way he did it. And it's just horrible. But anti-hunters, they jumped on that.
Yeah, that's their ticket meal.
Yep, that's their poster child for why we need to save hunting in the United States, or save wildlife from hunting in the United States. But anyway, back to the conduit. So they're trying to eliminate mountain lion and bobcat hunting, and they've included lynx, but we don't hunt lynx, in Colorado. Okay, and it's a ballot box initiative. So right now they're in the signature gathering process. But if it goes to the ballot, like we said, all these people that are unqualified to make a decision on wildlife are going to vote whether or not we should hunt lions and bobcat in Colorado. Okay. Now, what we've done, instead of that, just leaving that as a state issue and just a state org, which is CRWM, Coloradoans for Responsible Wildlife Management. They are a C4, which is a different type of entity. They're allowed to lobby. They're allowed to do political stuff. Where a nonprofit C3, like we are, is not allowed to do those things, but we're allowed to educate. We're allowed to. So we bring the education nationally to everyone. And now people in Florida, people in Washington and Maine and Hawaii, Louisiana, every single state, actually, to be honest with you, can either contribute to the fight or have their voice be heard on that fight. Now, they can't vote because this is a state voting thing, but they're participating in the fight with their dollars. Okay, so we talked a little bit about the propaganda that the anti-hunters and anglers are doing. They have like $20 million set in to run ads in Boulder and Denver and those outlying areas that would, have the highest
propensity to support their need.
Exactly.
Right. Okay.
So
yeah, I'm finishing your sentences because it's so interesting. I'm sorry.
No, it's perfect. It's perfect because my brain's is a little fried already today. But in order to put up a formidable defense, we need to do the same thing. We need to share the why. We need to let people know. It's like one of their main things they say is mountain lion is inedible. And most people don't think of mountain lion as table fare, but mountain lion is actually one of the best game meats out there. It's very pork-like. It's like a very lean pork. It's actually delicious. It's actually delicious. Same thing with bobcat. And I didn't know this, until like maybe 10 years ago. Well, no, more than that, because it was 2013. I hunted mountain lion, but the meat is excellent. We don't just lop off the heads and leave it out there. There's a lot of support from the Department of Fish and Game, or it's Parks and Wildlife in Colorado, but the Game and Fish Department in Colorado, we need to take out X amount of lions per year to keep balance and keep in check.
Right. And now keep the deer population down, keep the antelope population down, et cetera. Is that what you're referring to?
there's a prey predator carrying capacity.
Gotcha.
So we need to regulate both. You can't just a little like introduction. I didn't really introduce who I was and what I did, but I used to be I went to school. I got my master's degree in rangeland management and ecology, and I have a deer steward certificate, a certificate in wildlife management and forestry. So I know enough to be dangerous. When you come into a system and you come in to affect any part of that system in any way, shape, or form, if you do something on this side, something on the other side is going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
There's going to be there's a cause and effect with everything. So you can't say, hey, I'm going to take away 5 deer and not think about taking away 2 predators. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
You can't, mow the grass over here and not put grass over there. Like there's always a yin and a yang. There's a balance to everything.
Yeah. So we see it in fishing all the time, right?
It's in everything.
We're gonna add tiger muskie to this reservoir because we want to take down the smallie population or the perch population.
Mm-hmm.
That's the result, right? Like if you added a predator,
mm-hmm.
you're gonna lose another species.
Right.
Like it's not gonna just stay the same.
Sure. And so now it's going to be more complicated in Colorado because they introduced wolves, which was also a ballot initiative. And we should talk about that too, because this will tie things in for everybody really nicely. But going back to what your original question was, we brought national attention to that, and we've gotten people involved nationally on a state issue. And now, because of what we've done there and because of the awareness we brought, they are so much further ahead and better equipped to have this fight. So let's go back almost 5 years ago now when they were having this fight about the wolves in Colorado. I think they raised maybe like $800,000, and they were up against the same numbers because it wasn't a national issue. Nobody knew about it, but few people outside of Colorado, but mostly it was a Colorado thing. And anti-hunting, anti-fishing, they fundraise nationally. They throw Sarah McLachlan up on there on the TV and in the arms of an angel, and for less than a cup of coffee, you can save cute and fuzzy kittens. They're constantly raising money to fight us. We anglers and hunters, we raise money to put animals back on the mountain. We do things for habitat, waterways, wetlands, all this stuff. We're working towards that. So the fight concept of it it's uneven. Yeah. It's not even. Yeah. It's not even on half of our minds.
And what's crazy is if some of those things are like a right or privilege is removed, you're not only removing the animal, but you're removing all the infrastructure that we've built over the years.
Right. Yep.
It's a great point. I had never really thought about that, but that's very significant.
The reason why you can access a lake, the reason why you can get on a trailhead, the reason why you can go in the mountains right now and see elk and deer and catch mountain stream brookies you don't catch brookies in the stream, you catch brown trout, whatever. But the reason why you could do those things is because of the North American model of conservation. It's because it's a user pay system. Okay. This is why we're all in together, because we pay into this. We pay into it by hunting and fishing licenses. We pay into it by the tag sales and hunting. We also pay into it for Dingle Johnson and Pittman Robertson funding. So anglers buy tackle, fishing rods, all this kind of stuff. That there's an excise tax on that equipment that you buy.
Mm-hmm.
And that excise tax is called Dingell-Johnson. I don't know if you're familiar with that or okay.
Yes.
So Dingell-Johnson, and we had the same system in hunting. It's called Pittman-Robertson. Okay. The DJ funds and PR funds is what they call them. So the PR and DJ funds, if you look at it, they're a pie. Like, okay, I'll use Pittman-Robertson because I know the numbers off the top of my head. This year or last year was $1.5 billion. Okay. It was a $1.5 billion pie. And let's say you lose something hunting in Utah. Okay. And now you no longer need your bows and arrows. You don't need your guns. You don't need your ammo because you don't hunt anything else. That was what you hunted. You lost bear hunting, whatever. Now you're no longer paying into that system.
Mm-hmm.
You're no longer buying licensing. You're no longer buying guns and ammos or bows, all that stuff. You're not paying into it. So that pie just shrunk.
Mm-hmm.
So now at the end of the year, when they divvy up that pie, it used to be 1.5 billion. Now it's 1.4 billion. So now that pie just shrank. And the piece of the pie that went to all the different states is less money.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it, like what happened to you in Utah affected me here in Arizona. And the same thing goes for fishing. And on the grand scheme of things, we sit at this big round table. I like to paint that picture. It's called a conservation table. And hunters and anglers are literally the largest stakeholder at that table.
Mm-hmm.
Even though collectively, I think we only make up like 20% of the population. Probably even less than that, like 18% of the population.
Yeah.
Okay. 18% of the population, and we make up probably 40. I don't know what the percentage is, but let's say 40 to 50% of that table. So anti-hunting is always trying to diminish that voice. And they do things to eliminate that. Like, you're not going to see this in the fishing world, but you see it a lot in the hunting world. Like, they'll introduce an apex predator. The apex predator is put on the landscape, okay, and they'll put this apex predator on the landscape without a management program. So you won't have what we were talking about earlier. You won't have the balance of yin and yang. But this apex predator is eliminating prey species. So hunting is used as a tool to eliminate, or not eliminate, but manage prey species, right? Now that there's a predator doing that, there's less need for you. So they're removing hunters by proxy. And what that does is, if you look at the big picture, we talked a little bit about how the system works. Now, instead of 1,000 hunters paying into the system, there's 600 hunters paying into the system.
Okay.
So there's less money going into whatever the department needs to do to maintain wildlife.
Maintain and manage,
and build habitat and develop opportunities.
Meanwhile, they introduced another expense in this new animal, or this introduction.
Exactly. So, like, going back to California, in I think in the 70s or maybe the 80s, they eliminated mountain lion hunting. It is documented that just as many, if not more, lions are killed every year by state officials and paid hunters to shoot lions. So they didn't even save the lions. Like, they're not even saving mountain lions. All they did was transfer the guy,
arm
you
on
and me, who would have paid to go do that. We would have paid to go have done that.
Us paying somebody else to go do it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Oh gosh.
Yeah.
Painful.
So, we say it all the time here at Howl for Wildlife that anti-hunting and fishing is anti-wildlife, because we are the stewards of the land. We are the stewards of of the species out there. We're the ones paying for conservation. We're the ones that love and care for the habitat and the animals. We're not the ones
Yeah.
that, are there bad seeds within our ranks? Yeah, we all know them, right? There's guys that go out there and take fish beyond their the slot limit or the bag limit. There's we talked about this guy in Wyoming. There's few of us out there that are doing the things wrong. But that could be said about any population and any niche of anything you could talk about. So
the interesting thing too is who's number one to respond if there's a problem with a species or an animal type, etc. It's the hunters and anglers saying, hey, we need to get this fixed. I mean, it's like volunteerism for correction. In a lot of ways, it's really kind of crazy.
Well, to that effect, the game and fish departments use hunters and anglers. That's why we get surveys. That's why they use us for the eyes and ears and to collect data on what they're managing, because they can't possibly cover it all.
Yeah, but I mean, we have like the DWR around here. I think there was like, I can't remember. It was somebody told me at one point. I'm going to misquote this, but it'll make the point. But it's like, oh yeah, there's 5 DWR people for the entire state of Utah, and it was like, what? And they repeated it, and it was like, yeah. So, your chances of being able to contact one that has either been to your area or knows it intimately or is going to inspect your license or whatever, it's like really low. Like they're just, they go to the popular areas and try and manage those as best they can. And that's the limited resource they are.
Yep. So a lot of truth to that.
Let's do this. Let's, because we are limited on time. The last and third element, hunting is human, is what I wrote down.
Yeah. So, again, we were talking about that middle ground. We recognize that the middle ground is the most important when it comes to having an understanding of what we do. We don't need them to become hunters and anglers. Like I would wager that most hunters and anglers don't really want to bring in any more competition. It's already hard enough to go do what we do. But we need them to have an understanding of what it is that we do. We need to share those human intrinsic values that we spoke about earlier, the camaraderie, the meals, the heritage, the challenges, what goes into what we do, why we love what we do. They need to know about the conservation efforts that we do. We need to know about the money that goes into it. Now, that middle ground doesn't, the things that we take for granted, they don't even know about. And we'll kind of get into that. But Hunting is Human is a program. It's an outreach program that we are going to speak to the non-hunting public and give them the information and share these things with them through stories, through sound science, through interaction with hunters and anglers. And we feel that is going to save hunting and fishing for the future.
And you quoted me some numbers earlier. I want to requote those because I was pretty fascinated by that. And it was in population, I think is how you described it, 15% of people are anglers. 5% are in complete opposition of angling. Those are the guys of don't hook a fish. And then the remaining 80% are what we would discover or describe as in-betweeners. They don't really know right or left. And the reason they don't is they're not involved and they need education. And as we discussed, we're not going after the 5%. We're probably not likely to change them. And that's a 99% effort, 1% lift. But the 80% is a 10% effort and a 20% lift on a bigger number.
Yeah.
So
Maybe even
that's
better
kind
than that.
of, maybe even better. But that's where we're aiming. So your objective is, look, as hunters and anglers, we're going to go after that in between market. People who don't know it, we're going to start to educate them. We're going to perform outreach on that. And that's a perfect segue into our last part, which is the whole immediacy. If today you were going to take action to try and go do two things: educate the 15% of anglers that you know, and then two, go after that 80% of people that you know, they maybe don't hunt, but they'll enjoy the conversation and they'd be open to the conversation. What could we do?
Well, to kind of what you said, to your point right there, most people are going to be interested in listening to it. They want to hear about it. They don't know about it. The first thing we need to do is educate ourselves. You need to take the time to understand and I don't mean like learn it verbatim so you could spit it out, like what the North American model of conservation is. Learn some key elements to what positive impact what you do. Like if you're a fisherman, what does you being a fisherman do for fishing or for fish and the environment that we fish in?
Yeah. Like, I mean, describe your pie, right? In the taxation model. Like, do people understand that? I would bet majority of anglers, hunters don't.
No, they don't.
And then the non-ons don't either. It's hard. Yeah.
It's hard to unpack all. So that's why I'm saying you need to kind of like do a little dive yourself, educate yourself on these things. And then I want you to think about what hunting or fishing means to you. Think about all the things, like if it went away, like what that would mean. Like, this is something my family does, something what I love to do with my kids. This is, my
every
my
Sunday
getaway.
I go drink my coffee at the shop and talk to the guys and
all those little things. Like, and if you could formulate it into, if I came to you and I said, "Hey, Christian, what does fishing mean to you?" And in a 2 or 3 minute spiel, you can come back at me and say, "Well, fishing means this to me." If you can formulate that 3 to 5 minute like dialogue, then you're going to be set. Okay. As long as you don't start throwing away, throwing around, this is my right and this is my whatever.
Yes, right.
You're going to be fine. Yeah. You don't have to be a professor. You don't have to be.
Big part of that is you don't have to be, like you said, this professor, someone who can just verbatim recite it every time, but you have enough knowledge to be, as we said, dangerous.
Right.
And if somebody's really interested, they're going to ask you questions.
Sure.
And it's okay to say, you know what, I'm not really sure, but I would assume it has an effect.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, or you could say, hey, let me look into that for you and I'll get you that answer.
Yeah.
And that way, one, you're going to become more educated about it. And two, you're showing that person that you care enough, that you're not this person that just, arbitrarily goes on, in the woods and does whatever, or goes to the lake and does whatever. I got a pretty interesting story. When we were just at the hunting and fishing, Western Conservation Hunting and Fishing Expo in Utah, in Salt Lake, in February. And every time we got into an Uber to, go to dinner or whatever after the expo, we engaged with the Uber driver. It was easy because they're always like, "Oh, hey, what are you guys doing?" They want to make conversation, so they make conversation. Oh, we're here for this hunting fishing expo, and we started talking to them, and we found that, and I'm gonna relate this to hunting, so it's gonna cross right over to fishing, but they didn't know. None of the Uber drivers knew that we had to buy a license, that there was a tag. That a tag didn't mean a dead animal. Like, for instance, Colorado is a 9% success rate for the elk hunt. 9%.
So they sell 100 tags and nine
right.
actually get killed.
Exactly.
It's not 100 animals. It's 9.
exactly.
Yeah.
So they don't know that it's an opportunity for you to go out to possibly get one. Could you imagine if you went to Whole Foods and every time you went into, you paid to get into Whole Foods, and every time you went into Whole Foods, you had a 9% chance of coming out with food?
I love that. That
Yeah.
is awesome. Yeah. That's
So
exactly it.
we had these conversations, and they didn't know anything about hunter's ed. They didn't know that there was laws. They basically thought you went to Walmart, bought a gun, and went out in the woods and shot crap, and and that
Yeah.
was
Went
it.
home. Yeah.
And you went home. And that was what the idea of hunting was. So if there's all these things that we take for granted, like we know that there's slot limits, we know that there's licensing, and for hunting you have to have hunter's ed. And actually, so for me here, I'm a hunting and fishing guide in Arizona. I had to take tests to have that. I also had to get my captain's license to be able
For
to
the boat. Yeah.
to commercially take people out on my boat. And um they don't know that those things are in place. So if they don't know about those things, they definitely don't know about you know what's edible, what's not edible, what you're doing for conservation, what conservation really means, because that's a word that's being co-opted right now. It
Yep.
has been for the last 10 years or so from anti-hunting. They're using the word conservation, even though conservation by definition has a consumptive use aspect to it. What they do is preservation is completely different. That's a good thing for people to understand the difference between conservation and preservation, understanding that dynamic.
Yeah. I mean, literally just looking those two words up and
Yeah.
understanding them more intimately can make
Sure.
you a far more intelligent speaker to
Yeah.
both subjects.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, I guess my challenge, or my tip is we all interact with people on a daily basis, whether we're at work, in the break room, or waiting in line to get a coffee, or whatever the case might be. We interact with people, and if there's an opportunity to interject what it is that you love and what you do, and you can have that conversation or get to the place where you can say, hey, this is why this means this to me. A lot of times that person, especially if it's done right, that person is going to be left with a positive experience, and they're going to leave that conversation as a hunting and fishing ally. And when they see something that comes up in a ballot box, or they see something that comes up that they're like, oh, I know Christian, he's a good guy, he talked about this and that, I don't associate him and what he does with this guy who just left a bunch of fish on the bank, and whatever.
Yeah.
So and they can differentiate between the guy who tortured the wolf and
Yes.
you
Yeah.
and me.
Yep.
So that's why it's really important to have this conversation. The other part of that is, so I mentioned some numbers earlier. We're about 16 million hunters in the United States and 54 million anglers in the United States. Howl for Wildlife, we've been working on policy, and really we've been able to move mountains with thousands of people, not millions, but thousands. So if the decision makers are deciding on the policy, or deciding on policy based on the thousands of people they're hearing from the voices of the thousands, if we had millions involved, we'd be so far along. We would probably never lose any more hunting and fishing, to anti-hunting and fishing. We might lose it because of a species it's just not sustainable anymore. But if we have these conversations, you're gonna help protect those, and if you get involved and become part of the nationwide community of hunting and fishing, will be undeniable.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a great point. I mean, just that small number makes a huge impact. So I guess let's wrap up the show here. But I think what I would do is say, let's I want to challenge everybody out there who's listening to the show to go to the website, howlforwildlife.org. I'm assuming there's some kind of subscription. You can get a newsletter.
Yeah.
That's going to help educate you. I also say, if you are aware of a problem that isn't posted on there, reach out to Howl for Wildlife. There's a contact information there. Send them a note. Hey, this is something that we're concerned about. Try to get it involved there so that it gets more attention, etc. And then the last is share. I grew up in a religious family, and I know all religions, they go out and recruit. The religion of fishing and hunting, we need to go out and recruit people and get the right people on our side so that they can be educated and understand, what we're after. Because for me, fishing, it's a religion. I love it. I wouldn't want to live without it. So
same here. Yeah,
John, I really appreciate you being on the show, man. Let's do this again. Again, Howl for Wildlife. That's HOWL for wildlife.org. Go check out John and his team. If you have further information, let them know. Talk to the guys in your shop. Ask them if they're aware of Howl for Wildlife. Go to a fly tying night. Talk to people about Howl for Wildlife. I mean, really, let's try and spread the word best we can and get some things done here and protect what we love. I appreciate you guys. We'll see you all next week on the next show. John, thanks again. Toodaloo.